Hi, this is Andy Hoffman of CryptoGoldCentral.com, the sound money blog of the 21st century, in which I write daily of my vision of the future of money, in which gold plays a passive role and Bitcoin is the center of the universe. Try our free 7-day trial membership and contact me anytime at ahoffman@CryptoGoldCentral.com to ask about the blog or arrange cryptocurrency and/or precious metal related consultations. In my one-on-one podcast series, I seek to learn of and share the viewpoints of the Bitcoin community's top thought leaders and entrepreneurs. All episodes, including this, the 12th, can be found at CryptoGoldCentral.com, on my Twitter page at Andy_Hoffman_CG, and the World Crypto Network's YouTube channel and iTunes feed. This week, from somewhere in the South Pacific, my guest is Edward Blake, i.e. the Renegade Investor. One of the handful of crossover experts in the Bitcoin community, Edward is particularly adept, like myself, at relating the cryptocurrency financial market action to those of legacy assets like stocks, bonds, and precious metals. His work can be found at his website, renegade.investor.co.uk, his Twitter handle, which I have no idea why it's called this, at SharkyBit, the Renegade Investor YouTube channel, and of course, his semi-regular appearances on the World Crypto Network. Not to mention the last interview I did before leaving the precious metal bullion business 4 months ago, the Star Trek financial environment as crypto usurps fiat. Thus, with Bitcoin having clearly graduated this week to a new level of global adoption, I couldn't be happier to pry him from temporary sabbatical to vet his views on today's financial world. To that end, welcome, Edward, to One-on-One.
Hi, Andy. Thank you so much for having me on. Been really excited all week to come and talk about this, especially with Bitcoin hitting 10K. This is just an absolutely huge milestone for everyone in crypto, and it's just going to bring profound changes to the world in the near future.
Yeah, and we're thankful that we're thankful that you actually survived the day. What exactly are you up to in the last 24 hours?
So yeah, I've just come from Bali, so I was visiting some friends down in Ubud in Bali. So I was only about 20 kilometers from the base of Mount Agung, which is currently a massive volcano that's erupting on the island. And I think experts think that it's about to have a huge explosion. So I think there's 150,000 people trying to get off the island. So luckily I've sort of come to the island next to it, Java, and I've just been training here, doing the work, preparing for this interview. But yeah, I just hope that everyone back in Bali is going to be all right. But yeah, it just got really intense, and it was kind of poetic with the volcano erupting, with Bitcoin going through 10K. I was starting to think that life was getting pretty surreal.
Yeah, the gods are definitely noticing what's going on in Bali. Okay, so, well, yes, it would seem that the price and that of Bitcoin and the entire crypto sector is definitely the story of this week, to which I would agree 100%, with the one caveat that yesterday's price surge to $325 billion for the entire sector, including $180 billion for Bitcoin, is as much about monetary revolution as it is investment success, which of course needs to be addressed in the context of today's hideous correction to $297 billion for the sector and $166 billion for Bitcoin, which, since bottoming for the second time in 24 hours around 9,000, looks intent on re-challenging the 10,000 mark anew. And FYI, the current horrible price of $9,700, overseas it's over 10,000 in many places, and similarly horrible prices for many altcoins, would have been all-time high levels had this podcast occurred Sunday, i.e. 4 days ago. Thus, I'll break the segment into several parts, the first of which is the explosion of prices in Bitcoin and nearly all altcoins. Edward, what do you attribute the breakout to? And in its wake, is the sector overvalued, fairly valued, or undervalued?
Yeah, I mean, it's been an absolutely colossal year. When you think about it, the last high from 2013, which was about 1240, if you take the Mt. Gox price, we've gone up almost 10x this year, which is pretty amazing. We've absolutely outstripped every other investment on the face of the planet. And it was actually really funny watching the mainstream media respond to this, because they have two narratives. Normally, the one, like, this is a bubble. So they've gone from saying that Bitcoin is dead to now Bitcoin is a bubble. And it's like they have nowhere in between of looking at what is actually going on to get some perspective on where Bitcoin is. And you could argue that maybe we are sort of at a premium in the short term over fair market value due to the massive run-up. But when you look on a long-term scale, the upside is still massively unprecedented due to the amount. You have 400 trillion in assets globally, and Bitcoin's market cap, like you said, is just a fraction under 300 billion. So it's a shame that most people don't put any perspective when they call it a bubble, right? Are you talking a short-term bubble, medium-term bubble, or a long-term bubble? And so, yeah, that's the things that I've sort of going to get more specific with what time frame we are dealing with when you're calling it a bubble. The other thing that I keep seeing is, like, the mainstream always says they can't attribute why it's gone on such a parabolic run. Yet everybody in the Bitcoin space has been banging on about how this was always going to happen with Bitcoin. There are just so many confluences. It's like a perfect storm of events going on in the world, which is really driving Bitcoin. And one of the ones was really the powerful grip that the central banks and the banking sector and the governments put on the problem after the 2008 global financial crisis. They really tried to grip onto the problem when we had the crash. Instead of letting the problems play out in the financial system, they went into absolute control, which is bailouts, artificial manipulation of interest rates, quantitative easing and money printing, just to try and paper over what all the problems were. And what all they've done is create the perfect storm for cryptocurrency to come to fruition. They've driven the prices up now, so that Bitcoin has gone not just from this fringe, they used to call it like a fringe libertarian hobby, to this absolute global phenomenon right now. And I think we have just hit the end of the beginning in Bitcoin, and we are hitting that early majority, the very beginning of the early majority adoption phase on the S-curve model, and Bitcoin has just become a global phenomenon.
Right. It's funny, you know, I've talked about this before. Anytime something goes up a lot that people don't own or they feel threatened by, or in Bitcoin's case, both, they say two things. They say it's a bubble or it's a Ponzi scheme. And there's no substantiation behind it. I mean, you know, the Fed itself will tell you we don't know how to identify a bubble until after it bursts. But this is decidedly not a bubble because the adoption rate is rising as fast as the price. And it's whether it's retail or the wall of institutional money that is going to absolutely swarm. And people don't even realize that there's going to be thousands of these hedge funds that are all sitting there pissed off right now because they can't launch until January 1st. And that's going to be a lot of money coming in. And as for a Ponzi scheme, it's even funnier to call it a Ponzi scheme because for it to be one, you'd have to actually have someone like in charge that creates the Ponzi scheme and profits from it, as opposed to a decentralized open source network.
Yeah, like literally the definition of a Ponzi scheme is a centralized scheme with no real underlying investment, where old investors get paid out directly with money from new investors. Whereas Bitcoin is a decentralized scheme where the underlying investment is a massive global decentralized peer-to-peer platform that can disintermediate the entire legacy financial system where price is set off supply and demand for that underlying token. So they're so polar opposite in every single way that the absolute narrative that Bitcoin is a Ponzi, a bubble, a tulip, a South Sea, a Beanie Baby, all of these things are just, I always call it the equivalent of what the left does to the right in terms of politics, where they call them misogynist, racist, fascist, Nazis, instead of actually countering their arguments. It's those sort of derogatory comments because they have no arguments anymore. Bitcoin has proven them wrong time and time again. So instead of going into proper analysis, proper research in order to dispute why Bitcoin is going so big, all it's turned into is kind of like a slander in terms of all these ways of trying to just take down the absolute value proposition of Bitcoin, which is that it's going to disintermediate the entire legacy financial system and put in a massive competing currency that's going to change the world forever. And I think Michael Krieger, who we were talking about before we came on, actually did a great tweet yesterday where he said the reason that really powerful people don't like Bitcoin is because if it goes big, they cannot control it. And a lot of these people, their main primary goal is control and power over other people. So not only have they missed it out on an investment perspective, but if Bitcoin goes big, they'll never be able to control people again in terms of finance because it's going to create a system that creates a level playing field. So on so many levels, there's a lot of reasons why the big financial players are really going to be hating Bitcoin right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many reasons. In fact, I wrote an article today at Crypto Gold Central. It was called something like the end of statism run by old people, old men, you know, is going to be beaten by monetary revolution led by young. And that's butchered the title. But the point is, you see all these old men. It's always old men. I was watching this guy debate against Max Kaiser, and he's a British guy, and I mean, he just sounded like such a moron. And then you had, I was listening to the Jim Sinclair, debating, and he's like, who's that guy who does the space travel? Monk? I mean, and then you get the who's the other? There was it's Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel Economy Prize talking about, like, we need to keep things the way they always have been, and the young people who are taking over the world and are going to take over the assets of these old men are laughing. They are going to be living in a digital world, and they don't want power. They want freedom, and that's exactly what they're going to get in Bitcoin. As for the average person, it's exactly what you're talking about. You hear all the time that people can't see exponentially; they see linearly, and there's inertia. I mean, people just don't want to change. They don't want freedom, and most people don't have the money to invest in that freedom. But it's really sad how few people can understand what's going on, because I really think, from our standpoint, right in the middle of it, you look out at the world, and people, at best, they simply notice that the price has gone up. That's about all they know about Bitcoin.
Yeah, and going back to like all these PhD professors, I was actually listening to a show with Stefan Molyneux the other day where he talks about the symbiotic relationship between all these sort of professional institutes or academic institutes and the existing sort of financial elite. So a lot of these centralized institutions that create all these PhD professors get their funding from these centralized parties that Bitcoin threatens. So for them to continue to get their funding, they often have to toe the establishment line. And so a lot of the things that come out is then trying to ensure that they still get their funding and cushy lifestyle. Because the moment that they start going against the establishment narrative, you could be pretty sure that their funding is going to get pulled. And it really brings into question, like, the entire concept of having these Nobel Prizes. Because for me, it seems to me that it's there to provide people who are supportive of the establishment narrative. It's there to give them a lot of confirmation in the eyes of people. Like, everybody always goes, wow, he's got a Nobel Prize. So it gives them a lot of validity in the eyes of people. So I'm starting to question whether that entire system was set up just to enforce validity around people to support the centralized narrative. But just going back to what Joseph Stiglitz said, he said Bitcoin ought to be outlawed because it doesn't serve any socially useful function,
Yeah.
which is it's so preposterous. You've got to imagine that this guy is being completely disingenuous. I mean, so ending monopoly of inflationary fiat. This is a tweet I put out. These are all the things I think are socially useful. So ending the monopoly of inflationary fiat, ending unfettered funding of warfare that destroys entire regions, banking 4 billion unbanked people, speeding up global domestic commerce, global and domestic commerce, 1.6 trillion in banking fees that come to an end, ending naked short selling of fraud, reducing the cost of remittances, protection from balance capital controls, inflation, NERP, and the war on cash, alternative from central banks controlling inflation and deflation to enrich a few. And it just goes on and on and on and on. And probably the main one for me is the separation of state from economics, finance, and money to help prevent lobbying and coercion of the state. This is like, all of these things are humanity changing. It's going to change the direction of humanity for the better, away from all these centralized financial power. And for someone to say that at this point, with all the knowledge that is out there, it either shows that he has done absolutely zero research or he's being completely disingenuous. And I'm kind of fed up with these people who are just really just trying to stand in the way of a revolution that really needs to take place. It's going to be beneficial for 7 billion people that's on the face of this planet.
Right. And I was going to make some jokes there, but I'm like, no, I'm going to let him roll with that. That was a really good rant. You even did some preparation on it. I couldn't agree more. It's funny, like, and I've dealt with that, of course, in the precious metal sector, just watching these people make up excuses after excuses. But this guy Keene, who was debating Max Kaiser, and this is not the first time I've heard. I actually heard it on the big Sinclair Holter debate against Cliff High, where they're talking about, first they'll say, like Peter Schiff, it has no intrinsic value at all. It's completely worthless. And then they'll say, yeah, they would say, I read this article. They don't do research, but they read an article that had a spin that mining Bitcoin uses as much electricity as powering the country of Ireland or Nigeria. Therefore, they're going to ban it. I'm going, wait a second. It costs that much to mine it. It has that high of a mining cost, but you're saying it has no intrinsic value? the intrinsic, I mean, I was just reading from people like Max Kaiser that it actually is up to like $2,000 to mine a Bitcoin right now. And that number is only going to go up. So that sounds like intrinsic value to me. And as for these other things, yeah, I mean, it's a combination of intellectual laziness, and they think that they're being sycophantic to people who help them out, but it's kind of pathetic because the people that they don't realize who they're talking to. They're talking to young people, and when you speak in a patronizing manner to the future of the world, when Peter Schiff mocks the millennials and says they live at home and doesn't realize that the millennials are a massive generation of people who are pissed off, and they are computer savvy, and they know exactly why the problems of the world have occurred, mostly because of the actions that these old men have taken. And it's just so exciting. I talk about how I straddle the generations because I'm just young enough that I can appreciate, but I'm old enough that I can see what the old people have done. And I just think that the next, let's call it 3 to 5 years, will be unlike anything the world has ever seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that topic, like I obviously read Michael Krieger's article the other day when he talked about that Bitcoin isn't just a monetary shift, it's a generational shift, where the old school and all these centralized establishments have run their course. They've become completely corrupted and fraudulent and corrupted. And one of the great things about Bitcoin is that it's almost a solution to all the corruption that we see due to centralization. And that is that humanity has gone so far from being decentralized, when we were sort of, just subsistence farmers in decentralized communities, to the advent of modern agriculture, which then allowed us to create centralized societies, because you had a surplus of food, so people could then specialize into different skills. And now we've hit a point where humanity, I think, is outgrowing the speed at which these centralized institutions can manage these populations and all the complex economies that go around them. So I think that this decentralized and anti-establishment trend is just an absolute response to the fact that humanity wants to grow faster than what these centralized parties are allowing. And just going back to what you were saying with the generational one as well, I just realized I got blocked by Jim Rickers the other day.
Oh my God, what a loser that guy is.
Yeah, and I honestly didn't even say anything that bad. All I did was say the main mistake that people like Peter Schiff, Jim Rickers, and also Chris Dwayne, who runs the Truth Never Told YouTube channel, does, is they're looking at Bitcoin as if it's purely just a commodity like gold. Whereas Bitcoin, they don't look at the whole picture of what Bitcoin is, which is a massive decentralized peer-to-peer financial system that can facilitate all of those different things. But at the same time, it's none of those things. It can facilitate the store of value gold. It can facilitate a currency. It can facilitate a international payments rail. It can facilitate the distributed ledger, which replaces the entire need for central banks in the banking system. Bitcoin is all of those things, and at the same time, none of those things. And once you look at the bigger picture of what Bitcoin is, that's where the value proposition comes from. It's not just looking at it as if it's a replacement for gold. It's looking at it as a massive network that can then be built on top of. So all the services, businesses, and utility that are built on top of the network is what provides it with the value, not just the intrinsic value of the mining, but it's the absolute colossal, and the huge potential there is in building all different services on top of this network, which is going to make each Bitcoin, at the moment, probably still the most undervalued asset on the face of the planet. It's that colossal.
Wow, it's funny. I wonder if I'm blocked by Rickers. After all, and everyone, if you want to see the podcast that got me fired at Miles Franklin back in August, I just had enough with the conspiracy theories. You could Google it. Just type in, it was at SGT Report, the Conspiracy Central, where it's titled something like, "People will be talking about this interview tomorrow," where I just went off on this Lynette Zhang, because it got all the precious metal people who are desperate to listen to someone who says Bitcoin's going to crash. And so they come out, and they got quotes from her and these other losers talking about how the government's going to commandeer Bitcoin. And I went off on everybody, including Jim Rickers. So I wonder if I'm actually blocked by him. I just would never go look at his Twitter site to see. I do know that I'm blocked by Jihan Wu, which is funny because I didn't even know it until like Vortex had some kind of tweet, like quoted one of his tweets, and when I went to read it, it said you're blocked. And I'm like, wow, I feel very, very powerful that he does that. But as for what we're talking about here, look, the difference between what we've dealt with for the past 10 or 15 years, where the powers that be have worn out their welcome and destroyed the world. And where we're going in the future is the creation of Bitcoin. That is the Star Trek financial weapon that will destroy the fiat weapons of mass destruction that are more Flintstonian, as we talked about. Now, we're going to move off that topic and go to something more related to Bitcoin specifically. Let's talk about the Bitcoin Dominance Index. Now, the way I see it, the sector would be better off without it altogether, given how misleading the market capitalizations of the vast majority of altcoins are. Not to mention the distortion caused by including Bitcoin Diamond, or Bitcoin Gold was just put in last week, and then we can have Bitcoin Diamond will be imminently added, and on December 17th we will have Super Bitcoin, whose heavily marketed, strongly financially backed fork may well be more valuable than B Gold or B Diamond, and if we're lucky, the fraud that is B Cash. Sorry, Roger, it's B Cash, not Bitcoin Cash, so don't give me the bird. Now, clearly, Bitcoin has outperformed the vast majority of cryptos in the current run-up, but it's unclear what this means and what we should expect going forward. To that end, Edward, do you believe Bitcoin's dominance, with quotes around it, is rising or falling? And irrespective, how much does it matter? To that end, do you view the altcoin sector as a means to speculate or a viable and necessary part of the Bitcoin ecosystem?
Yeah, so with regards to this, there was actually an article that came out yesterday from Bloomberg talking about the reasons that all the different reasons that could still kill Bitcoin right now. And one of them was that it was just going to have this sort of .com blow off top, you know, and everything crashes. But I said in response to that, you know, like out of the .com crash came these multi-trillion-dollar companies like your Apples, your Amazons, your eBays, like all these massive, colossal companies that were born out of that .com bubble. But that means that, you know, at some point in the future, maybe there's going to be a huge correction where a lot of these altcoins fall off because the vast majority of them don't hold any real value. I'm not going to have any serious network effect to threaten Bitcoin. Also, in this year, I actually did a video called altcoins versus Bitcoin, why Bitcoin's network effects will make it a monster. And in that, I talked about how Bitcoin was like the Godzilla of the blockchains. You know, like it's something you really don't want to underestimate. And I think this is at the point when altcoins were topping out on their run and Bitcoin was under that 50% dominance. I think it bottomed out at around 45%.
The Ethereum flippening.
Exactly. This was the height of the flipping, the Ethereum. And if you ever want to know the time to sell a coin, when people start saying it's going to overtake Bitcoin, that always marks the top of that run. So that's a great sell indicator. But yeah, in this video, I talk about how don't underestimate Bitcoin. Just because these altcoins have come up, Bitcoin is still the Godzilla and it's going to come and exert its dominance again. And that's exactly, from the moment I made that video, that is exactly what happened. Bitcoin came back, dominance index well above 50% now. That's not to say the altcoin is still a viable speculative instrument. And I think in the future, we're going to have exactly what happens after the .com bubble, is that we're going to have 5 or 6 maybe different coins that really come to fruition, have big network effects and provide a serious sort of unique selling point as opposed to Bitcoins. But even then, you can never rule out that Bitcoin might take the entire thing, you know? So I think for me, I have the most amount of money in Bitcoin. I speculate in alts to maximum 20%. In actual fact, they also sold off so much that I have taken sort of a 10% position in altcoins right now, just try and maybe accumulate Bitcoin on this bounce. But, you know, I don't give financial advice, and you really have to manage risk when you do this because the altcoins are so volatile, it's so illiquid. It's like it's almost like a geared investment based off of Bitcoin, which is the underlying investment. So you have to be really careful when you invest in these. But in the long run, I really think that Bitcoin is going to continue to outcompete. I think a lot of these coins are going to fall off. We're going to end up with 5 or 6. But however many more cycles we have is what I'm really interested in right now. Altcoins look really low, and it seems to be that they're cyclical. You know, they have this massive rise, this massive sell-off, and then the cycle just starts again because people know all it takes is for speculators to want to make more Bitcoin, for them to find a bottom. And one of the best trading methods is really just accumulation and distribution. It's a really good way to eliminate risk when trading them. But in the long run, I don't think there's anything now that's going to really overtake Bitcoin, just due to the fact that it has those 7 network effects of the speculation, merchant adoption, consumerism, applications mining through to the financialization and eventually turning Bitcoin into a global settlement layer, especially when it becomes a global strategic asset, which at the price of 10,000 with 330 billion, 300 billion market cap in all these assets, like I really think that Bitcoin is soon going to become a global strategic asset. And I wouldn't be surprised right now. I was actually talking to my mentor the other day, Javier Marti from Bitcoin Global Investments, or someone who has really helped mentor me in the past. And he said that he wouldn't be surprised right now if governments are already accumulating, buying in the background, already setting up mining applications, mining farms. And yeah, I really think that Bitcoin is so ingrained right now, it's going to be really hard for any of these altcoins to compete long term.
Right. And by the way, for those who are not, don't have a background in British finance, geared means levered. I learned that.
Oh, yes.
But anyway, yes, I mean, there's so many things to address here. We talk about strategic assets. Of course, it already is becoming a strategic asset for smaller institutions, who a lot of whom are going to be entering the market in 2018, especially when the ETFs join the CME futures. That's guaranteed to happen in 2018. But to become a true strategic asset, you talk about the $300 trillion. It's got to be at least a couple trillion, and it will be at least a couple of trillion. It probably will be a couple of trillion in very short order. And I agree completely that governments are already starting to buy, and there's a lot of institutions that are already front running their own business because they're buying it personally, but the businesses are going to be buying it next year, starting January 1st. And as for, generally speaking, when we talk about the mania, you're damn right there's going to be a mania. The mania that we're going to see in altcoins, and it could be next year. I mean, it could be. If not, it won't be too much further after. Will be something that makes the .com area bubble look like nothing, because there's just so much more money that's been printed, that's floating out there, and there's so much fewer assets that are worth investing in, or even have any substance to them to invest in. So, but when they do ultimately have crashes, they are just derivatives. They are .coms, the alts. Bitcoin is the internet. The internet didn't crash in the year 2000. .com stocks did. Bitcoin is not going to crash because yes, it can have ups and downs, but it's going to be the altcoins that people race out of and into the internet itself of money, which is Bitcoin. And the other thing about Bitcoin dominance, aside from all these other things like these inflated market caps, is you have to take into account those crypto dividends. They make Bitcoin a lot more valuable when you add them in. And when you look at, now you have the top of the table, Bitcoin Cash, or B Cash, is number 3, and B Gold is number 5 or 6. B Diamond will be above. B Diamond may pass Ripple when it comes into it. And then you have Super Bitcoin. So that meme that Jimmy Song had done back 3 or 4 months ago of all the top coins being hard forks may well come into fruition. Okay, next, now that the scaling, hard fork, and Chinese FUD issues are gone, as well as the countless myriad other issues that were once considered risk factors but no longer matter, we must now consider the next significant hurdles to block Bitcoin's path, one of which unquestionably is the upcoming inevitable showdown between cryptocurrency and the legacy markets for mental mind share and financial dominance. To which I ask you, Edward, what, if anything, should we be worried about in the near and intermediate term?
So in the near term, the one thing I think could happen is a sell on the news event for the CME futures. And I think the reason for this is that you got to think that a lot of people that are in legacy finance, like, their hubris and ego is humongous. Like, you look at your Jamie Dimons and all these people at the top of Wall Street, City of London, like, their egos are unparalleled. The hubris is unprecedented. And that's, I think, the reason why Bitcoin is so big today, because they didn't even give it any weight that something so small could actually come and threaten them. And that's an absolutely beautiful thing. But I think you got to imagine that these people are absolutely pissed off that a lot of people have gotten before them in this. Like, they are, like, relatively, in terms of Wall Street and London, late to the party in this. So I think that their first action could be to try and short the hell out of Bitcoin. So this is the thing, like, I think there's going to be a massive face-off with the, in the past, like, the price of Bitcoin used to be selling the margin-free speculation. So when you had the rises from $30, back in like 2012, from $30 down to $2, the swings were so big due to the fact that the price was set on the margin by speculation. So a lot of the money was in a lot of the coins were in the hands of the speculators who were just pumping and dumping with each other. The same thing when you had the Cyprus one, is went from $266 back down to about $40. So we have these huge swings because a lot of the movements was done by, and the momentum was initiated by the fringe, by the speculators. Again, in 2013, there wasn't enough market depth to really stop that humongous euphoria to despair market cycle. So you had the rise to it, $1,200 back down to $150. So this time you've had the rise again from that breakout at $1,200 right the way up now to about $1,150, like a 10x breakout. So you've got to question yourself now whether Wall Street or all these speculators coming in can now start off the momentum to try and short the hell out of this market, to try and shake as many people out as possible so they can then centralize and accumulate these coins themselves. And I really think what we've seen this year is the fact that maybe because we are starting the early majority of the S-curve adoption model where growth goes exponential, we have seen so many short squeezes, including the one which really got the party started when we broke out of the 1200 high from 2013. So all this year, there's been massive attempts for speculators to try and short this market at pivotal Fibonacci extension levels from the last high, when we've hit like things like the 4,000, 3,000 to 4,000 area. You know, everyone was trying to short it then. The shorts were like accumulating on Finex, trying to take the price down. But again, because there were so many people coming in, and like we see now, there's 125,000 new accounts a day at Coinbase. Coin in India are like 100,000 accounts a month. So the amount of people coming in is colossal. And Trace Mayer actually did some calculations the other day that all the money coming in, I think if each person just puts $10 into Bitcoin, that actually takes out the new supply of Bitcoin every day, which is the 1,800 new Bitcoins that are created just through the protocol and the mining process. So yeah, I think that the first biggest threat is going to be Wall Street coming in and trying to shake out as many people as possible so they can get accumulated at a much lower price. There's no guarantees for that. They could come in and start buying, you never know. For them, 11,000 per coin is relatively low. Who knows? Because there's so few coins in circulation. There's so few coins actually being floated when you take all the coins that are in long-term storage held by Satoshi or held by corporations off the market. So that's the first thing I'm looking for right now.
Well, let me go further with that then before we get to the longer term, because obviously this CME futures thing has been discussed ad nauseum. Thus far, I was part of the whole Bitcoin news show where we had Simon Dixon to talk about it. And of course, given my background with the COMEX and precious metals, I've been asked about 10 million people. Are they just going to be able to come in and short it? And we've gone over this ad nauseum. The biggest reason, I mean, there's many reasons I don't think it's going to be an issue like before. But the biggest of all of them is exactly what you're talking about. If we're truly at the bottom of the S-curve, as far as both financial adoption and then right behind it, actual adoption of how it's used in the real world. We're talking about, I think Wall Street is going to be net long these things. You talk about, everyone always thinks, oh, there's future, so everyone's going to short it. And I'm going, first of all, anyone who's shorted Bitcoin has had their head handed to them, with the exception of Mt. Gox, where you probably couldn't short it at the time. And I think that the world, as we're talking about here, it's becoming a strategic asset. They all want long exposure. And again, when you have the blockchain also, it's not like the gold reserves where you can pretend you have X, but not really have that and leverage it. The blockchain knows how much Bitcoin is out there, and people are going to see all these shorts and not believe them. So my guess is that the CME futures is going to cause an explosive increase of people looking for long exposure. Yeah,
I'm open to both scenarios, but it's just something I've been cautious about in the very short term. Like, they could come in and try it, but like you say, every attempt to short Bitcoin this year has been like the biggest epic short squeeze you've ever seen, with people just getting wrecked. I mean, yeah, so it could go either way, but it's something that I'm really sort of paying attention to, and that's going to be an extremely volatile moment when that goes live in December. And apart from that, like I was trying to think the other day, what really friends Bitcoin now, but at this point in history, like it's come so far, like all the things that I used to think would threaten this market are just falling away. Like I call 27 a year of capitulation to Bitcoin. And I wrote at the beginning of the year that two things that are no longer synonymous in 2017 is attacking Bitcoin and maintaining your credibility. And that is why everybody, maybe with the exception of a couple, have completely capitulated and agreed that this is now a global phenomenon. And when you have something of this nature, like it is absolutely unstoppable. I mean, sure, you can try and bring in regulations and things like that. That used to be my other biggest concern about Bitcoin, but I think that might even go the other way, because there's, like I said earlier, there's going to be definitely two ways that all these countries compete for Bitcoin as a global strategic asset. One is going to be the investment, two is going to be mining. And I actually think there's going to be a regulatory competition to attract all this massive entrepreneurship, which is going to be regulatory arbitrage. And so I think that we're going to start to see countries even bringing moratoriums on Bitcoin regulation to attract, and even maybe incentives to attract all these businesses.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what I'm talking about, because I'm talking about, and I wrote about this yesterday, I'm bringing up the topic of the confrontation. I'm not talking about Jamie Dimon making comments or even the Chinese shutting down some exchanges, big deal. I'm talking about the powers that be, but the powers that be are different in every country. Japan is not fighting Bitcoin right now, and a lot of these small countries are going to gang up together with this common currency that can help all of them. So there's really only a handful of players. It's like almost every government is against Bitcoin, is against gold, right? Because it threatens fiat currency. But they're not all going to be against Bitcoin. And when you think, okay, let's say, okay, the United States won't like Bitcoin because they got the dollar. Europe, same kind of thing. And then after that, it's kind of like crickets. Like, who else is going to join? Is China? China hates the US and Europe, so they're not going to join with them. They may join. They may fight Bitcoin separately, but that's now you're talking about multi-front battles against this ambiguous, decentralized network. I'm just thinking of the confrontation. Like in gold, the confrontation was done in propaganda and in the futures markets. Where is it going to be done here? Is it just the United States? Is it like, well, we're going to ban it? I mean, what does that even mean? Where is the confrontation going to be? And is it going to be now? Is it 2018?
It's going back to that when you said, like, the fact is that in the past, my very first video I put out on my channel was 9 reasons why Bitcoin will continue to outcompete private blockchains. And point 2 was politicization and surveillance of the existing legacy financial system. And that's why in 2014, David Cameron, our old prime minister, he actually put up the proposition of putting sanctions against Russia, as like excluding them from the SWIFT international payment network. And at the same time, China was creating their own SWIFT system. So it just shows that all these major powers that are really all the trust is breaking down between countries, because the more that we go into this debt crisis plays out, the more countries are going to start to turn on each other, because trust is going to completely break down. It's going to become like shark eat shark kind of nature. So all of these countries are going to want a level playing field financial system that they can use that provides an alternative to the politicized SWIFT network. So for a lot of countries, they have a massive incentive for Bitcoin to succeed in the long term. Even if they're in that cognitive dissonance period of thinking that it's going to take away their power in the short term, in the long term, this is going to bring about an international payments network that benefits everybody, because it means that the US really is going to lose their hegemony of having absolute control over those things. And I think, yeah, that's a massive incentive for other countries to not come down on Bitcoin like America is really going to try to with their entrenched oligopoly. Who are really trying to push back against Bitcoin.
It's the game theory. We've heard anyone who's in Bitcoin any amount of time just use that term game theory over and over again. That's what's so beautiful about it, because it pits everyone against everyone, unlike the fiat currency system, where it really benefited most of the countries in the world to join on, or they were required to join on, but not here, because you could be a small country. I've written, one particular piece was called Bitcoin will make or break governments. There are going to be small governments that are going to be able to become big players in the world. And conversely, there are going to be some big governments that are going to really ruin what they've got. Now, it's not too late for the United States if they did something now, but they're clearly not going to. They are going to fight to the death, as will the European Union. But like you said, even within the European Union, you have countries that are going to be at each other's throats. There's a lot of pissed off countries there that don't want to be ruled by Germany, and one of them was the UK, who's doing the Brexit. And again, we talk about attracting investment. That's why it's so funny, where the Chinese, they think they can, make rules about trading or mining, when the fact is there's so many countries in the world that are desperate to take that market share. But more importantly, there's so many corporations and institutions. Everyone is going to learn how to mine, and it's not going to just be Bitmain. There'll be tons of competitors, and everyone is going to be competing to get this mining because it's profitable. It could actually make an entire nation go from being in the red to being in the black. It's game theory 101. So that's why the confrontation, I think, may not be as intense as people fear it will be.
And not only that, like the more diverse, I talk about stakeholders here, like I'm not using it in the actual sense of like as a company, but the more diverse stakeholders become in Bitcoin in terms of the amount of diverse range of people that are investing in it. And like we see now, we've got the biggest hedge funds in the world getting involved. I just heard the other day there's like Russian billionaires getting involved. You know, have massive links to governments and influence over the government. So you got to ask yourself here, all these massive players getting involved, they're not going to want the boat rocked once they get involved, and they have massive influence already within like lobbying with the states and coercion of the states. So you've got to think that it's going to become even more difficult to rock the boat here, and it's going to become even more dangerous for officials to try and come down this once you have extremely powerful people with extremely deep pockets getting involved and knowing that they can make an absolute fortune off the appreciation in Bitcoin. So I think as the stakeholders in Bitcoin become more diverse all around the world, everyone's just going to capitulate to it.
Right.
It's like Victor Hugo says, there's some ideas in this world are so powerful they just cannot be stopped, and I really think that's where Bitcoin is. And they'll try and throw everything at it, but if they can stop it before now, I just don't know how you're going to stop it now.
Yeah. Well, put it this way, for someone who's had to deal with negativity for years, I mean, I see all the problems in the world. And there was really no alternative that I saw except precious metals. But precious metals is it needs negative things to happen, and it assumes negative things will happen. And that's why this powerful idea of Bitcoin is a positive. It actually makes me optimistic. I don't feel like I need to prep and hoard as much, because I do feel there's like this movement, this invention is something that could advance humanity as opposed to be pulled back by where we were going. But now let me just take this, because we're talking about all the people, the billionaires that are coming in. So just take it a little less political for this next question, a little more practical. So basically, amidst this historic financial adoption surge, market liquidity has clearly dried up. Paradoxically, amidst record trading volume, it's just very hard to buy the stuff. In other words, the bid-ask spreads have exploded higher. Brokers have been so busy, it's been difficult to get a hold of them. I mean, you have a day like yesterday and Coinbase is down and Gemini is down and Kraken was down, just based on a few hours of manic trading. And this is before the wall of institutional money comes in January 1st. There's going to be thousands of these hedge funds that are opening up. You throw in the CME futures contract, that's going to draw in even more money. And of course, the ETFs, which is going to be the coup de grace for sucking up liquidity. I mean, man, the GBTC we learned has 1% of all of the Bitcoin that's ever been mined. So I want to hear your thoughts on, until the financial decentralization becomes ubiquitous, we have these decentralized exchanges, how are people going to acquire and dispose of large positions?
Yeah, actually, Trace Bear did an absolutely brilliant video on Crush the Street regarding the low supply of Bitcoin that's actually floating on the market, and like the fact that you have the mini coins that are like held up by Satoshi, you have probably about 4 million Bitcoins that have been lost. I know there was an article in the mainstream the other day that was talking about that. You've then got the long-term holders, so you've got that money put up in offline storage who aren't going to touch them, and now you've got an elastic supply, which means that it doesn't matter how big demand gets, the supply cannot increase more than 1,800 Bitcoins a day, which in 2020 is going to drop to 900 Bitcoins a day when we drop to a 2% inflation rate on the network. So at the same time, we're not even, like, someone actually corrected me the other day, because I said, we're in the early majority stage, but we're at the beginning of the early majority stage of just the early majority, let alone the late majority, the laggards that are going to come into this network. And in terms of that, the institutional money's about to come in. So yeah, like the absolute spreads, and then you're getting a lot of slippage on the exchanges due to the fact that they are so illiquid. I mean, this could get absolutely crazy. There's people floating the idea that we could go 10x from here, like in a short space. So I just don't know how people are really going to get hold of who want to buy in bulk, especially like if you start seeing the CMEs kick off. I mean, I mean that's the reality of it. I just don't know, like.
Well, your answer is what I would have thought your answer is. There's no answer to it. The supply is not there, and of course, I love when always everyone talks about this 21 million coins. There's 21 million coins. I go, no, there's 17 million coins. It'll take 120 years. We'll all be dead when those 21 million coins get there. And then, of course, you subtract the 4 million that are lost and the million in Satoshi's wallet that are probably never going to be seen, and the tons and tons. I mean, I would bet that I see 489 viewers. Let's say 400 of them own Bitcoin. I'll bet you 390 of them are holding them on Trezors and ledgers that are never going to be touched. And it's really going to dry up. So when Mike Novogratz, who I say is going to be the crypto Warren Buffett, says 40,000 next year, I believe it completely. And I'm trying to think of what show I was talking about on the other day. God, who's I in? It's a long week. But that's a $650 billion market cap. And that is really chump change in the world of money printing. That is not even close to what Apple's market cap is. And I think it's going to be a lot more valuable than Apple. So if you have any more comments on that, then we'll get to our final question.
Yeah, like it's just a situation where it's so finite. It's absolutely ludicrous. That's why these talks of bubble already are just ridiculous. And there was actually an article that Turner Meister put up the other day. I think it's one that he created back in, I think it was maybe 2013. He said that, and it shows the sort of projection of the price growth over the years, and it actually nailed it. I think they're expecting 10,000 in late 2017, where we are now. In December 2017, it projected a 10,000 price, and the next sort of price target, I think, is 4 years, where it hits 100,000, and it's projecting almost like 2x every year from here on out. So that's like what I've been thinking now is we may see 2 to 4x every year from here on out. I don't think we're going to see another 10x year from this point. But I may be wrong, like crazier things have happened in crypto, but even 2 to 4x a year would actually make a lot of sense from here.
Well, remember that Bitcoin moves in double dog years, as we learned this year. And I'm not even just talking about the price, just everything. I mean, to think that in July, we were terrified we'd never get SegWit and that Bcash would take over the world. And then 4 months later, we have $10,000 Bitcoin. Things move very fast. And look, the people are not just buying Bitcoin because it's rising rapidly. People are sensing that there's a change coming. They're not paying that much attention to financial markets. No one cares if the Dow is going up, the rigged Dow. No one cares what Janet Yellen has to say. No one even cares what's going on geopolitically. There's a sense that something is changing here. And therefore, let's say it is a 10x year in 2018, and we get to 100,000, Max Kaiser's target. And the thing is, that's really not that much money either. It's a lot of money. It's just $1.7 trillion. That's, I mean, how big is the global stock market? 100 billion bond market?
I just got to reel these off because the bubble topic really is the most prevalent right now, and it's just literally the most aggravating when every single financial institution is chucking bubble left, right, and center without even looking at the underlying fundamentals. It's just sloppy. It's lazy. But I did a massive tweet storm on this the other day. I was like,
a massive tweet storm.
I did. I was so fed up with just this narrative. And I was like, well, look, even at the moment, 150 billion, that's like not even a half of 1% of all the assets that's invested globally. Central banks printing, like even at one point, it was almost double the Bitcoin market cap every month. A bubble implies that you've got a crowded trade. And I actually noticed the Wall Street Journal trying to sell this narrative. I think they found one grandma that had invested in Bitcoin, and they were making it out as if every grandma was investing in Bitcoin. It's a saturated market. And it's like they're just trying to drive this narrative by fluffing up all these talking points, which are just absolute nonsense. Like we haven't even hit the earning majority phase yet. The inelastic supply, the fact that a lot of Bitcoin's held up in storage.
Yeah, it's being bought. It's being bought because it's a strategic asset, not because it's like a speculative bubble. They want, again, so many people try to equate. Peter Schiff was trying to equate it to real estate valuations in 2007. They don't understand. These are not speculations. Bitcoin is not a speculation. It's as Max Kaiser said, it's the first mega asset class to be developed in hundreds of years. And it is. And it's becoming a mega asset class. And even if it is $100,000 of Bitcoin, $1.6 trillion is not a mega asset class. $50 trillion is a mega asset class. And I'm sure that the global currency markets that it's competing with are at least $50 trillion. So yeah, it could easily get to, I absolutely believe it could get to $1 million a coin. And that's not like this speculative bubble thing. It's a new asset class. It's going to be usurping fiat currencies. It's also going to be usurping a lot of the traditional asset classes. We've talked about this. Stocks and bonds are becoming as archaic as fiat currencies are. And the other thing is central banks, right? You know, they print money, they buy stocks, they buy bonds. You think central banks are not going to print money to buy Bitcoin? Are you kidding me?
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, they know what's, yeah, go.
Sorry, go on.
Go on, you.
No, seriously, go for it.
Okay. Central banks will be printing money to buy Bitcoin. I'm sure some have done it already. But at some point, you know, you can only buy so much stocks. At some point, you're going to own all the stocks. And everyone knows the valuations are ridiculous, and you're going to have to do wash sales. You actually will run out of stocks, and you're going to have to do wash sales to keep the prices up. But in Bitcoin's case, they know that the inflation is there, and they know that you know, the people in government, they're not stupid. They see that this change is coming, and they are going to be printing money to buy cryptocurrency. And when I say crypto, it won't just be Bitcoin. They will be buying all of them. So that's what I talk about the mania. Everyone's going to be buying everything. Bitcoin will be the king. But there's going to be a lot of investment in stuff just because it's going up, which is completely different from why Bitcoin is going up.
Yeah, it's absolutely ludicrous. And I actually made a video at the beginning in January 2016 called "Will Bitcoin Investment Become the Only Game in Town?" Like, that was when the price was $366. Now we just hit 11,500 in the space of like, what, 18 months? And it just shows you, like, it is the only game in town. Like, the stock market's hitting record highs. No one even cares, because what is the ROI on that return? It's like next to nothing now that the value of the stock market is so high. Whereas Bitcoin is here just chewing it up, like 1,000% returns in 1 year, best performing asset the last 8 years, the investment of the decade. And we're just looking at those markets just going, well, enjoy yourselves, but we're just going to stick with crypto here. Because the party's barely started yet.
One of the first articles I wrote at Crypto Gold Central was called History's Most Perfect Investment Vehicle. So whether you like it for monetary revolution or speculative reasons, there's something for everything. I've been around 30 years. I've seen all kinds of investments, from .coms to other kinds of stocks to sovereign bonds and all kinds of, and I mean, there's nothing even close. This is the most exciting opportunity ever. And it doesn't matter if the price is 300 or 3,000 or 30,000. Because you can see all these things we're talking about easily. The case for $1 million Bitcoin is not really that much of a stretch to me. It's not like saying pets.com is going to go to like 10,000. You know, Bitcoin at $1 million is a very reasonable expectation when you talk about these things. So I will just then move on that note to the final question. And I say, yes, it is still November, but barely so. And with that key January 1st date looming, in terms of the unleashing of 2018 capital budgets for both investment and capital spending, I don't think it's too early to start wondering what next year might hold. I know it's a broad question, but tell us, Edward, what are your big picture expectations of how 2018 will unfold in terms of financial investment trends, technological innovation, and political changes, both internal and external to the Bitcoin community?
Wow. There's like the one common thread that I'm seeing right now is just a humongous global awakening. And I'm actually out here in Thailand doing a lot of conscious work. So I've had like a bit of a spiritual awakening. I've done a lot of breathwork meditation. Even met someone who teaches orgasm meditation, all these different types of things. But the one common thing I'm learning from everybody here is how big their business is and how fast their businesses are growing. People are really looking for a completely different lifestyle from what we currently have in the West. And this is where the generational change comes in. And people are really looking for quality going forward. And one of the big things I see with Bitcoin is that it demonstrates high value. It's a quality currency. So this trend towards quality is going global all the time. People want better lives. They want to be healthier. They want to be more conscious in everything they do. They don't want to be bogged down with everything that we have in the West is just really taking us away from connection. And Bitcoin is just an extension of that entire trend as well, because it's just a high quality currency, it demonstrates high value. And all these fiat currencies just don't demonstrate any value anymore. And one thing that people are attracted to, especially with regards to relationships, is always anything that demonstrates high value. So I really think that this trend is going to continue. The anti-establishment decentralization trend. Bitcoin is going to become the coolest thing on the planet. I've been doing so much consultancy work out here. I even went to, anecdotally, I was at Bali at Hubert, which is a massive co-working space where Andreas Antonopoulos did a talk, and I went to that Bitcoin 101 session on a Saturday morning, and there's people flowing out of the meeting room doors because there's not enough space in the actual room. And it just shows that the groundswell here is absolutely colossal. And so I don't see any reason why this growth isn't going to continue into next year. I'm expecting 2 to 4x on the price from whatever we kind of finish the year here, which I think could be, you know, in the high 4 figures. So that would be my prediction. I really think, again, 2018 is going to continue this capitulation of everybody having to fall into what Bitcoin wants, really. I mean, I know it's not sentient, but it's like you either have to get on the free train or get run over by it. And I don't think 2018 is going to be any difference here. I think at the beginning of 2022, we may see another round of the altcoin. The altcoin cycle could get going again. The one thing I'm looking out for, though, is whether the early majority adoption stage of Bitcoin does mute that cycle. Like, that's the one thing I'm looking at. I think the markets are at a turning point right now. I haven't had the hesitant to say that we're kind of in the accumulation stage again, but Bitcoin's rally has been so strong, it's really been putting a lot of selling pressure there. But I really think that if we start to get a few of the big altcoins pop off, then we could see a renewed altcoin rally into the beginning of 2018, like we did last year at the beginning of 2017. It's just like a cyclical market. But yeah, I really think everything's just going to fall in line to Bitcoin again. I really think that the fact that, you know, as we go through the 5-figure point, it's going to become a global strategic asset, even more so. I really think even all these governments are going to start hoarding, and yeah, I cannot see anything really that's going to stand in the way of this. I think we're probably going to see a lot more forks, and I think everyone's just going to do the same as they do now, which is wait for a pump and then convert those forks back into Bitcoin, which they've done with pretty much every other coin. And it's just going to continue like that until people get sick of that, like they do with the ICOs. And then at the end of it, we're going to end up with Bitcoin as just this colossal powerhouse asset, and I think by then all the focus will be on maybe 5 or 6 coins once we get a bit further down the line here. But yeah, that's what I really think is going to happen. I really can't see anything getting in the way of it at the moment. I was thinking about this the other day, and I really struggled to see here, outside of like maybe a massive technical glitch or something, which even then, with the Bitcoin core management team, which again demonstrates high value in the Bitcoin chain itself rather than all these Bcash and all these other versions of it, I just can't see how this is really going to be stopped right now.
Yeah, I think the key is, you know, that this year was mostly about the investment and appreciation. It's financial adoption that's taken place, especially at the end of the year as we pass that magical $100 billion market cap, and all of a sudden it becomes investable. It's going to be a lot more investable when we get to the 250 billion level sometime next year. But I think this year is going to be, you know, you start out talking about the whole social change. It's a good thing. You know, Michael, whatever that Stephen King says, there's no social value. No, that's exactly what you're talking about. It has more social value than any investment in history. People are buying it because even when you're buying gold, it's different. You don't feel like you're in a community. You feel like you're protecting yourself. But in Bitcoin, when you buy it, you feel like you're joining a community that's ending an oppression. And even that includes a lot of wealthy people too, who don't like how the system goes. So I think the social perception is going to start to change, and you're going to see a 100% correlation with Bitcoin price moves with the social zeitgeist changing as people start to realize, hey, this decentralized thing is pretty good. I don't care what Janet Yellen or Mario Draghi say. They have no impact on the world anymore, and they can't hurt me the way they have in the past. And then the other side of it is political. It's going to be, you know, what goes on. I mean, look, the technological stuff, that's going to be just sitting there going on and is going to blow us all away. You know, we'll have lightning networks and all these things going, but it's almost going to be secondary to the social change and the political change. And I think, okay, what's going to hurt it inside and out? And this year was all about the internal political battles. And as far as I'm concerned, they're over. The last one was, you know, Roger Ver's last attempts. They failed. He's done. Jihyun Woo is done because there's going to be so much more mining capacity that's going to come into the world in the next year or two that he's just going to be another player. And Roger Ver is just going to be another guy who could have been someone great, but he'll just be a very wealthy guy. So I don't think I think we are 100% done with internal politics. It's all going to be about external politics. And that question I asked before, who can challenge them? I mean, is it like the U.S. is going to ban exchanges? Is that all they got left? Like, we need Coinbase or else, we'll have no Bitcoin?
Yeah, exactly. And I really think that, like you say, like all the worry around Bcash and stuff, like that's all new once you get the layer 2 scaling in Bitcoin. When you get 100,000 transactions per second, and there's literally absolutely zero reason to hold Bcash apart from the speculation side or any of these other coins. So yeah, in general, like this is just, I think once you get the layer 2 scaling in Bitcoin, all these other coins become absolutely mute then at that point. And yeah, I just cannot see anything that can really stop it right now. I'm gonna go back and like check myself on that because I really have to like push myself to realize how this is going to be affected. But I mean, at this point, it's just got so much momentum behind it. It's just a colossal powerhouse.
All right. Well, I will end it at this point by telling all the 525 people listening, which is pretty cool because we're like at our max amount of listeners right at the end of the call, that you are on the right side of history. And I agree with Edward. Yeah, of course, there's going to be hurdles, but different kind of hurdles. And they are what I'll call high-level problems because the Bitcoin network is stable. It is immutable. It is not going to be stopped. It's just a matter of how fast. And I think it's going to, I really do believe that 2017 is just the year where people start to notice it was around. And by the end of 2018, everyone will know not just that it's around, but what it is and what it means. So with that, we're going to conclude today's podcast featuring one of the alternative media's most diversified thought leaders and Bitcoin supporters, the Renegade Investor. Check him out at renegadeinvestor.co.uk, at SharkyBit on Twitter, and the Renegade Investor YouTube channel. As for me, please check out the free 7-day trial membership at my not brand new anymore website, cryptogoldcentral.com, or sign up for a full year for $225. And contact me if you have any questions at Hoffman@CryptoGoldCentral. Otherwise, thanks and have a great crypto day.